Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Rob Draper, and welcome to Single Malt TV Conversations. Today I'm joined by one of the most influential and at times controversial figures in modern whisky, Mark Reynier. Mark is best known for his work reviving Bruichladdich Distillery and more recently for founding Waterford Distillery, where he's been pushing a very clear idea that terroir matters in whisky. Now that's something we touched on in our last session with Peter Bignell at Belgrave in Tasmania, and today we're going to explore that in much more depth. Does where grain is grown really shape the flavour of whisky? And if it does, why hasn't the industry focused on that more? Mark has spent years challenging convention, from transparency and provenance to the way whisky is made and understood. And today we're going to dig into that and much more. I have loads of questions from members. Fire off any questions you have in the chat. So let's dig in. Mark, welcome to Single Malt TV. No holds barred and no stone unturned.
And that's, yes, well, thank you for having me. As I was going to say, I was about to do my own sort of whiskey tasting, sort of a mime.
I thought that I liked that whiskey tasting. Actually, it was pretty good. You could do it by imagination.
Well, it's very nice to see you again. A long time no see. Of course, a lot of things have happened since we last met in person in the mill house
at Bruichladdich. Yeah, that was a while ago.
It was.
Yeah. That was actually about 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm reminded that it's 25 years ago this May at the Fay Shield that our first opening of the distillery was on I think it was 28th of May 2001.
Oh wow.
So it's 25th anniversary this May. And I think they're holding some events up there. Unfortunately, I can't go to them. I have to be elsewhere at the time. But
are you still involved with Bruichladdich, or?
Well, I go past it quite often because I live. My farm is about 6 miles further down the road.
And I
wouldn't deny I found it quite difficult. After the Remy sale, and but no, I mean it's fantastic to see. I see various folk, Alan and the distillery manager. And various other people. It's Islay, it's a community.
Yeah, when you went over to Waterford, did you take any of the people from Bruichladdich with you? Or?
Oh no. But funnily enough, the inspiration came from Waterford, from Bruichladdich. Being sitting, it was one sort of summer. It must have been harvest time, so it must have been sort of August. Sitting on that little wall in front of the distillery, overlooking Lochindale and over towards Ireland, which you can see the north coast of Ireland. It's only 30 miles away. And we're sitting there. I was sitting there with Duncan McGillivray, who was the distillery manager. You'll remember, absolute charming man. And we were sitting. There was some problem, some harvest problem, some issue. And he said, look, I got to tell you that, the best barley I ever saw at this distillery, and remember, I've been here since 1966, I think it was. He said, the best whiskey came from over there, as he pointed to Ireland. And that sort of got me thinking. And so when I left Remy, in Bruichladdich with Remy, I wondered what I wanted to do, and I sort of wanted to I really wanted to carry on what we'd sort of put in play at Waterford at Bruichladdich.
Yeah, because when you went to Bruichladdich, I was watching one of your videos, and it said and you'd said in it that that when you turned up at Bruichladdich, you felt it was the most underappreciated whiskey in Scotland, and there were things they were doing that you thought you could do better. What were those things?
Well, that was more on a sort of industry-wide thing, because I started as an independent bottler in those glory days of the early '80s, when sort of barrels of whiskey that came from the 60s, distilled in the 60s and the 50s, were being offloaded by all the major stockholders. Spring cleaning, they were getting rid of odds and sods, bin ends, whatever. And a friend of mine, Gordon Wright, he told me, he said, look, if you're clever enough, you can get onto the distribution list of these clear outs and buy these barrels and select the best ones and bottle them. And that's what we started doing. And a label named after my maternal grandparents, Murray McDavid. And it was a glorious time. I can remember tasting some of this stuff and thinking, my God, why am I selling wine when we make this? Who knew?
Yeah.
And it was that startling. It was, I'm in the trade and I'd never heard of this stuff. Where's it been all this time? And of course, you realize it's been under the table. It's been kept suppressed. An industry that wanted blended whiskey. Forget the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like the cat was let out of the bag. This secret, and we all felt like sort of Robin Hood, that you were sort of stealing from the rich to give to the poor. It was a fantastic time, amazing. Yeah. But of course, very quickly you realize it wasn't going to last. But the simple thing is, they didn't. These distilleries were shut down. They didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So clearly the stocks were going to run out. Then what? And that's where I think it all got a bit awkward, because the then what was it's the first time I ever heard it. Filling malt. They didn't even call it single malt. It was filling malt. Malt destined for blending.
Yeah.
Made in a far more commercial way, a lot more homogeneous. What I call the clap, the cheapest liter of alcohol possible. And you couldn't help thinking, well, this isn't interesting. The wood was crap. It was all homogeneous. And you just thought, surely I can do better than this. We know it's possible to make great whiskey. Sorry?
That was just because they were worried about blends, and no one was really pushing single malts at all at that point, right?
Well, there were two main ones, but they weren't really selling them as a category, single malt. They were selling them as individual distilleries, and that, of course, is Glenfiddich in 1962.
Yeah.
And then the irrepressible Alan Shiak, who in 73 decided that, why bother putting Macallan into a blend when it stands up as a single malt. Yeah, so those were the two pioneers.
Glenfiddich was basically the only whiskey I'd ever heard of, other than Johnny Walker Red Label, and obviously the blends.
I mean, inspirational, the idea that why not just drink this on its own? Yeah. Market it on its own, triangular bottle, off they went. So they were the two forerunners that sort of went out on their own. But what I'm trying to get at is, as a category, as a sector, single malt really, didn't exist. It was like 0.1% of whiskey. But very quickly it took off. And it subsidized the collapse of blended whiskey in the UK. Basically, all those, whiskey mac, whiskey soda, all that post-war generation, as they sort of died off, so did the sales. But the value was compensated by single malt.
Yeah.
So it was quite convenient for the industry.
So what was when you went into Bruichladdich? You went in 2000. When did you go in there? 2001, or was it in the late?
No, 2000. The acquisition was the 19th of December 2000, the same day my son was born. It's difficult to forget.
Yeah, you won't forget that birthday in a hurry.
No.
So when you went in there, what was the goal? Was obviously to push Terroir, because I remember when we first
that was for me, yes. But the goal was, what we bought was was actually a 1.4 million litres of whiskey, dating back to 1964.
Yeah.
But very, very erratic production supply. And the distillery was pretty much thrown in for free. It was pretty dilapidated. It hadn't been working for 4 or 5 years. And in that climate up there, it's, pretty exposed.
Yeah.
So the gutters were full of weeds and hanging off the building. The shutters were all flailing around. It was rusty everywhere. It was pretty dire. So the obvious thing was, well, one is to get the distillery going again, and there the simplicity of a Victorian distillery, that a really purpose-built distillery, was that the engineering was pretty robust and pretty agricultural. So that took us from December the 19th through to May the 28th, I think, or May the 21st. So 5 months or so to get it going again.
Yeah.
And Duncan McGillivray, of course, he'd been running it all, so he knew how it went. And then it was combing through the stocks, and as an independent bottler up to that point, you're sort of in a position where you get to see the whole industry's dirty laundry, and it was clear. Had become clear that there was this sort of dividing line of when things were really lovely and individual, and when things became very homogenous and commercial. And that dividing line was pretty much 1973, the OPEC oil crisis, and coincidentally the year that Macallan became a and that carried on here with these stocks. When we went through the stocks, everything post 73 was pretty mundane, and everything pre 73 was absolutely orgasmic. The contrast couldn't be clearer. We also got the chance to compare one day's distillation, where half the morning's distillation left the island and was stored in Glasgow, matured in Glasgow, and the afternoon half stayed on the island. And we were able to bring those two together again and compare them. And
was there a big difference?
Oh yeah, huge. Which is sort of what we already knew from independent bottling, that those whiskies that were matured beside the sea demonstrated a different characteristic to those that were matured inland. Various studies have been done. I think, funnily enough, one of them by Macallan. It's to do with it's not just where the distillery is; it's where the warehouses are.
Yeah,
and it's whether there's a foreshore. If there's a foreshore exposed twice a day, you get sort of the algae eating the seaweed, and they fart dimethyl sulfide. That's that smell you get when you run up and down a beach. That bracing, ozone. It's DMS, and your barrels are breathing that. So that's what gives them that slightly some marine characteristic, which is quite attractive.
So you think there really is a huge difference between aging, say, on Islay and aging in the warehouses down in Glasgow?
Sure. And not just Islay. It's as I said, it's where you've got a foreshore. Exposed. In other words, where you've got seaweed and algae exposed twice a day. That's what makes the difference. Deep water, you don't get quite the same effect. But this was just observation from being an independent bottler and seeing all these different whiskies. In fact, as Murray McDavid, we actually gave it a title. We actually put it on the label, Coastal Malt. Because we felt it was that obvious,
made a difference,
and that attractive.
So what did you take from Bruichladdich what did you learn from Bruichladdich that you took over to Waterford?
Oh well, so getting the distillery going again, going through these stocks, being very, very aware of the difference between pre-73 and post-73. And then combing through these stocks to find these different runs and bottling them up because, we found something really interesting and we'd bottle it up because we thought it was interesting.
Oh, it's funny. When Charlie and I dropped in there one time, I think we were over at Bowmore or something, and we thought, let's go around and see what Mark's up to. And we turned up and you were jumping around like a little schoolboy because Jim had found a cask, and you said, "Oh, thank God you're here. Jim found this cask. You got to come and try it." And I'll never forget. It was the funniest thing. But I'll tell you what,
it was like that because these barrels get stowed away, and back then nobody bothered to look at them again. And there was no records about what was this is very much how whiskey was. It was just any barrel, recycle it, use it again. There was no interest in the wood. It was whatever was cheapest. So that was something that became very clear to me, was that that policy of recycling wood was detrimental and a wasted opportunity of allowing whiskey to mature properly.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it sort of begs the question: well, where does whiskey's flavor really come from?
Yeah.
Is it the wood? That's what the industry will tell you. 80% of it comes from the wood. No, it doesn't. It comes from the barley.
Well,
that's what we started doing on Islay, was starting to persuade farmers to grow barley again. Now, when I did this, I had no idea really how difficult it was going to be, how difficult I was making it for farmers. Nobody had grown barley on Islay since the First World War.
Yeah.
When basically, the young lads didn't come back, and that sort of form of farming just stopped because the climate is so hostile. The ground is so wet, you can't get onto it to prepare it until quite often till May. So sowing in May instead of March means you've got a very short window of opportunity before the autumn gales start, which would flatten everything. And worst of all, you've got the geese coming back from Greenland, who'll hoover it all up. So a very narrow growing season, but augmented by a much longer daylight. The sun doesn't set till 10:30 in the summer. So, but the daylight is a lot longer. I worked it out once. It's about 2 weeks extra of daylight as a consequence. So very difficult conditions.
When you started using the local barley, because I know your thing is that you want to, especially at Waterford, you want to be single farm for all the bottlings, and but in Islay you weren't able to do that, were you? You couldn't do it all from a single farm because there just wasn't enough production.
Well, no, I mean it wasn't about a single farm. It was just about having, it says Scotch whiskey on the label.
Yeah.
So you'd think that everything was Scottish barley, wouldn't you? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So the first rule we had was that the barley had to come from Scotland, and then of course you take it a step further. Well, we're on Islay. Why not Islay barley?
Yeah.
Well, a quick calculation worked out that we couldn't have produced all our barley on Islay. Physically impossible. Not enough agricultural land possible on what is essentially a rock in the Atlantic with a meter of peat on top. So we ended up doing roughly half and half barley on Islay, half on the mainland. And then, of course, malting it was difficult. We had to take it off island to get it malted. It wasn't ideal, but the moment that I was really looking forward to was 1 December, and I think it's about 2003, when I invited all the farmers to the distillery just before Christmas, and we were in the still house, and we gave each of the 10 farmers or 12 farmers, I think it was, a glass of new spirit of their own barley. And it was one of those extraordinary moments where it all went terribly quiet. And these big farmers sort of curled up in sort of really sort of shy. And they nosed these. And I told them, you don't even need to drink it. It's 70%. It's straight off the still. Just nose it. That's all you need to do. And you saw them doing this. And then you could see the pride swelling, the chest puffing out as they stood up, as they realized that, this was really rather good. And then there was like peacocks. They were sort of running up and down,
running around,
showing off, and then, and of course, that's when the fights started, because it was like, well, how come you think yours is better than mine? Let me say, and you had this sort of competitive nosing of the whiskies, and then what followed was a sort of rationalization. Why is mine better than yours? You sowed the same day. We're neighbors. I saw you. And yeah. Well, perhaps it's because my soil is sandier than yours. And where you are, it's a bit more peaty up there. Perhaps that's why they're different. You had farmers who'd never heard of the word terroir rationalizing why these spirits were different and how the ground was producing these different results.
And they could nose the difference.
Yeah, it was happening there in front of me. And this is not professional whiskey tasters at all. This is farmers tasting 70% spirit and on the nose able to tell that they were different. Whether one was better than the other, I'm sure that's not the point. The point was that they were different. Why were they different? And this is what they were rationalizing.
Yeah.
And you go, hallelujah, there you go. It's what I knew would happen. I was pretty convinced. I just wanted to see what they thought. And to this day, I think that's one of the most, black and white demonstrations of how terroir influences the flavors of barley.
Yeah.
What's interesting is the mechanic behind it.
What when you moved over to no, I don't want to ask you about Waterford just yet. What I was going to say was when you started talking about terroir, I remember when I first started coming over there in 2005, there was a real reaction against it in the industry, and it was almost like you were walking around poking people in the ribs with a red hot poker.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why was that? What was
a number of reasons. One is it's a bloody stupid word. There's no English language equivalent, that really captures, the true intent of that word.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. It's got the sound of some pompous French sort of thing. I don't really understand it, and so it's got that fear of the unknown. But terroir is very simple. It can be summed up as the three-dimensional interaction of a soil, a microclimate, and topography on the nurturing of a plant, and therefore its fruit. It's clues in the name, microclimate. It's a very small scale thing. Farmers sort of get it. They don't call it terroir, but they understand it. Gardeners understand it. It's called gardening. But this French word has this sort of elitist sort of cachet to it, I suppose. But really, it's just because there isn't another word that provenance. Well, that's not enough. It's that three-dimensional interaction of microclimate, the soil, and the topography on how that plant grows. Any plant.
Well, I tell you another interesting thing. When I was talking with Peter at Belgrove in Australia last on the weekend, one of the other things he said was he said all that stuff about terroir, but he said he believes there's also building terroir, where because he uses wooden fermenters, and he thinks that there's the microorganisms that are growing in the fermenters.
Sure. Okay. No, I get that. I mean, the wine guys would say that too. You get some places where they fastidiously nuke the yeast to have a neutral background, and others that don't. And wooden fermenters are more susceptible to and in the rafters and whatever, a sort of domestic strain. That's true. That's been there with wine and whatever. As far as I've been concerned, you're trying to do things, as level as possible. So introducing yeast, and yeast that rather than unknown, has always been the modus operandi that I've preferred. Certainly, I think if you had the time to play a bit more, then you could perhaps do some of those yeast experiments. But terroir is primary, and of course even the French terroir has been hijacked to refer to a region or a culture or a department, whatever. But that's appropriation. That's not really what terroir is. Terroir is this much more localized, much more finite thing.
Why did it seem to scare the Scotch?
Oh, well, it's very simple. They're very simple, Rod. Very simple, because it begs the question: where does your barley come from? Heaven forbid. And this is what the industry doesn't want to talk about. Because they don't want to have to tell you it comes from the Ukraine. All the narrative is about, the hills of Scotland and the glens and the babbling brooks and the monarch of the glen and, where the eagle soars. And by the way, our primary raw ingredient comes from the Ukraine. It's inconvenient. So that has to be kiboshed. And so the big players, just don't want to go there. And since they basically own the whiskey narrative, this is an inconvenient truth, and therefore has to be suppressed. I sort of knew that would happen, and one forgets the balance of power in this industry. You remember the marketing spend of Pernod Ricard and Diageo is between each of them £3 billion a year. Across the whole groups. So the muscle and the story and the narrative is controlled by them. So anybody that has the presumption to challenge that gets whacked on the head. So I got whacked on the head quite a lot. But you can taste it. It's not like it's an esoteric, ethereal thing. You can actually taste it. There's a theory, and you can taste it.
The thing that must have been freeing for you is to go over and start Waterford, because from what I've seen of Waterford, and I know it's all sort of gone belly up a little bit now, but from what I could see in Waterford, you had total control, and you had individual farmers.
Well, and more than that, you didn't have the cynicism. and that was one of the reasons of going to Ireland. Duncan McGillivray being best barley ever. Well, over this Bruichladdich period, you're going, well, actually, you know what, this barley's, this is where it's all at. The theory that that barley on that field will give you this flavor. We've been able to show that. But even so, the industry goes, the critics go, oh, no, nice idea, but it's not possible. In fact, one of the industry talking heads would say, it's lovely idea, but really, we do too many nasty things to it, too many mechanical processes for it possibly to come through in the spirit. They use a 17th century drinking song, a sort of a poem written about an allegory of brewing in the time, in the industrial era.
Yeah.
To say, well, malting, the distills, or any flavor would be destroyed. Which, I mean, laughable if it wasn't so sad, because it fundamentally shows a misunderstanding or ignorance of how the process of whiskey is made. Yeah. I mean, you've been with me there, with some industry people, and you realize these guys don't actually know what they're talking about, because they haven't done it. So Peter, you had recently, that's how it's done. That's a man that knows how whiskey is made, where the flavor is, and where the important bits are. It's not the stills, the shiny stills. It's the fermentation and the barley. That's where whiskey's flavor comes from. And if somebody in the whiskey industry cannot answer that question, where does whiskey's flavor come from? Well, then, you sort of wonder what they're doing in it, and I think this has been the great journey I've been on, is trying to show that, it's the distilling is sort of the end bit of the deal. The maturation is terribly important. Yeah. Yes, you do need wood, good quality wood, but it's not the finish; it's the start. Yeah. And that starts in the field, and that starts with barley, and that's why we are mandated to use it, because it has all this flavor. Why does it have all this flavor? And that's the interesting thing. Do you know of any other cereal or plant that has managed to move from Syria, where it was indigenous, to North Scotland, where it's indigenous, an extraordinary plant that's adapted over 10,000 years from one hostile environment to another hostile environment, totally and utterly 180 degrees apart. And the reason is because it mutates. It mutates to survive wherever it's found itself. It adapts to the environment and to the terroir of where it finds itself. And each time it mutates, it's adding on a little bit more flavor. So barley has accumulated 2,000 flavor compounds, which is 4 times more than in wine. This is what makes whiskey so spectacular. It's the barley. The flavors in the barley. So our job as distillers is how do you get it out of the barley? And that, of course, is harvesting, malting, milling, and the most important of all, fermentation, which is extracting those flavor compounds into alcohol, and then distilling is concentrating it up. And you put them in the barrel, and they get micro-oxygenated, which is maturation, and that's what we enjoy in older whiskey.
Yeah, earlier on you were talking about the barrels, and I pulled this off the some of those Waterford ones.
Yeah.
If the cask doesn't, do you look at it that the bulk of the flavor comes from from the barley and a small percentage from the cask, or do you try to keep the cask as a neutral player in the?
No, I mean the wood is really important, but for the opposite reasons to how the industry looks at it.
But how do you marry those two things together?
Yeah, the industry's realised that actually they're onto a winner with a finish, because you can get one clap pipeline, cheapest liter of alcohol possible, and then you can make 5 different variants from it by putting it into whichever fancy wood you like, and
Yeah.
So it's become it's been hijacked as a concept. But what's really happening with wood, as long as it's fresh wood, the grain of the wood is allowing those flavor compounds, the 2000 from the barley that you put in, and it's allowing a micro-oxygenation of those flavor compounds over time. So very, very, now, it's a bit like Gore-Tex. The barrel is like Gore-Tex. It's sort of, it allows the angel share, to leave, but it allows air to go back in. Otherwise, you'd have a vacuum. You'd never get the bung out. So it's this micro-oxygenation through the grain of the wood, assuming, like Gore-Tex, that the grain hasn't got blocked up.
Yeah.
And the older the wood is, the more it's been abused and used, the less of those grains are operative. And so you actually end up with whiskey that's not maturing at all.
Are you working off the Scotch rules of, it's got to be aged for 3 years in oak and in Ireland, or are you?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty good rules. I mean, single malt rules in different countries, like America's just started a single malt thing, and they've relaxed some of those rules. English single malt, for example, is arguing about the interpretation of single malt. Their argument is, isn't it better that you tell people where the barley comes from? Which of course they don't in Scotland.
Well, I like your I like the on one of the videos you did, you said if we're going to put Irish whiskey on it, then the barley has to come from Ireland. And
you'd think that's normal, wouldn't you? I mean,
made a whole lot of sense. But in a way, it's
of course, what the Scots would say, but there's not enough distilling malting quality barley available, and it's cheaper to get it from Ukraine, where it's flatter land, it's cheaper labor, it's vast areas. Even during a war, it's still that's where it's all coming from.
Yeah.
So what does get used in Scotland is the brewing quality malting barley. That does get used in Scotland, but the distilling quality, most of it ends up in Japan. And I just think that's, for me, it's just, it's like, coming from the wine world, it's like, oh, this is Chateau Lafite, but the grapes are coming from Chile. I mean, it's an oxymoron. I don't get it.
Well, the quality of the barley, I was doing some reading on it, and the quality of the barley, Duncan was probably right. They're saying that Irish barley is some of the best in the world.
Well, the simple thing is, Waterford is on the same latitude as Cambridge. Yeah, it's Cambridge. It's 260 miles further south.
Yeah,
it's in glacial soils. It's in a rain shadow. It's the hottest, sunniest part of the British Isles and Ireland. It's an ideal place to grow barley.
Yeah,
that's why I went there.
When you, I noticed on all the casks you've got the name of the farmer who grew the stuff, and I had a video that I downloaded where you each farm goes into its own little cubicle sort of thing, so they're all separated. Do you keep them separated all through the process? And if so, were you looking at each bottling as sort of like a cuvee or something like that? That it was.
Well, the concept is well relatively simple. Unfortunately, I got rudely interrupted before I was able to completely demonstrate this. And this was a problem we had on Islay. Is it was a bit Heath Robinson.
Yeah.
We weren't able to set it up efficiently because there was a lot of resistance to doing it. A lot of industry resistance, a lot of even my colleagues, was slightly embarrassed. Should we be doing this? My accountants, no, well, so there was a lot of resistance to doing it. With Waterford, that was like free. I could do this properly the way I wanted to do it, knowing that that these concepts worked, and basically setting up the ultimate distillery, which will probably never be repeated. It was a one-off. It was a brewery. Really at the heart of it, a 1792 brewery on one side and a very, very modern 2004 Diageo brewery for Guinness. So very, very state-of-the-art brewing technology. So I mean, it doesn't look like a distillery, does it?
Yeah, it looks like
the brewing. Yeah, it's the brewing technology that I wanted, because brewing is what you're doing, getting the flavor from the barley.
Yeah.
So the whole logistical supply chain, getting farmers to grow barley is one thing. Getting them to grow barley in volumes that can be malted, because maltings today are vast, they're huge. And I was very lucky to get Minch Malt to reopen an old Bobby maltings that they'd had built in 1964, which they reopened, which allowed me to do these small scale maltings so the unit we had was 130 tons of green barley, which by the time you got to malting was 90 tons. And by the time you got it to the distillery, having malted it, was 70 tons.
Yeah.
And that 70 tons gave you roughly 200 barrels of spirit. Now, the concept was to build the logistics to keep them separate so that we could then distill them separately without contamination, and put them into barrel separately. So each farm would go into its own portfolio of American and French oak, so that ultimately we could bring those individual spirits together. There you go. That's the cathedral.
Yeah.
To create a layered effect of flavor complexity. Now this idea is a wine idea. It's what they use in champagne, and it's what they use in the top Bordeaux wines. It's called a cuvée. They're assembling components, so they're separating and identifying individual flavor components, and then putting them together at a later stage. And this gives you mindfuckery. This gives you complexity. And this is what I wanted to introduce to whiskey, the ultimate complexity, by having those individual components identified, separated, distilled, which we can then, like a great chef, assemble to create this ultimate complexity. The trouble is, I only got as far as showing people the individual components, the single farms, and I was just getting around to showing what happens when you put them together when we ran out of money.
Yeah. So what actually happened at Waterford? Can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, apart from the pain, well, the simple thing is we ran out of money. the plan was, as I said, this logistical chain, and to build a war chest of whiskey, maturing whiskey, to give you optionality further down the line. But I made a fundamental mistake. I didn't anticipate the dysfunctionality of a epidemic like COVID.
Yeah.
And I didn't anticipate what would happen if there was a war. And those two things together at precisely the wrong time meant that the race to create revenue to counter the increased costs of production and stock holding interest, I couldn't do it fast enough in a market that didn't want anything new.
Yeah.
Because of the post-COVID distribution chain and cost of living crisis that followed from it. So it was a coming together of events which I hadn't anticipated. Any one of them, yes, but not all of them together at precisely the wrong time. We didn't have any meat on the bone to survive.
Yeah.
That very crucial moment in distillation, in creating a brand.
When did you didn't go into production really until, what was it,
2016? 2016 was the first harvest. So we went to market. Now it just seems. We went to market the day, our open day was the day before lockdown, the first lockdown.
Oh, perfect.
So our first shipments all got stuck in warehouses in New York and wherever, because everybody got laid off and everybody sort of battened down the hatches. It couldn't have been worse.
Yeah.
And then of course everybody's stuck at home, and you're trying to explain a new whiskey. It was, and you couldn't promote it. It was immensely frustrating. And then, of course, I think the final straw was our US distributor going bust. But I mean that was incidental really. But
down the road,
a shit show. And the guys that were helping me make this all happen, the shareholders that supported me doing it, I let them all down. The guys that helped me at the distillery, and Neil and Ned, and it was because when the shit hit the fan, I think it was Ernest Hemingway said, when you go bust, first it's very slow and then it's very quick. And I can tell you, it was very quick. Obviously, having that stock of whiskey was very attractive to our bank, and they realized they could obviously get it back pretty quick.
So the Tennessee Distilling Company bought all the plant, and what's happening to the whiskey now?
So I was trying to buy the whole thing.
Please tell me you're going to have it.
I tried to buy the whole distillery back, but really it's the stock that that's the I know how good that stock is.
Yeah.
Because of everything we did with it. So the very least is I'd like to have some of that stock. And Tennessee is a contract distiller in America. And they look at it as and of course the point is we're in a period where the Diageos and the Remys and the Pernots, all those companies have all changed their CEOs in the last 2-3 months.
Yeah,
it's been an appalling post-COVID super cycle period. Share prices have halved. It's been Armageddon, and so
Well, also
the people
people
that should be buying this, the Diageos and the LVMHs, they can't. They haven't. They haven't, and they won't be buying anything for some time to come.
but the thing is,
So
from what
really,
I've
it's been
been
sitting
finding,
there too big for most people to absorb, and so it's going to get broken up.
yeah, and what I've been finding, talking to a lot of people all over the world, is that people are moving away from whiskey now, especially younger people. And so, well, you don't agree with that?
Well, no, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of stuff. All the prohibitionists can't believe their luck, so they're all jumping from this, hanging from the chandeliers, going, "This is great." We got you all on cigarettes. Now we're going to get you on booze. So they're all lapping it up. So you're hearing a lot of a lot of that.
A lot of
And then in America, you're hearing a lot about sort of hemp and hemp-based
yeah,
stuff. Then you've got Generation Z don't drink. Well, they do. They're just drinking in a different way.
yeah,
They've been priced out of pubs. They've been priced out of restaurants. They're drinking a different way. So you got this big picture stuff, yeah, which is going on. But then I've always been of the opinion that people should be drinking less, but they should be drinking better.
yeah,
And of course, that's happened in the UK with whiskey. The volumes of whiskey in the UK have collapsed by 60% since 1970, but the values haven't, because people are drinking single malt,
yeah,
not blended whiskey with soda. In France, since 1980, alcohol consumption has fallen by 60%, but the values stayed the same. Same thing. They're not drinking a liter of red wine with every meal in every roadside cafe that like they used to. They're drinking better. People are more informed about their drinking
yeah.
decisions. They're more aware. They've learnt more.
They've
They've
got a lot
traveled
more
more.
knowledge
They've
now with the,
experienced more.
and it was interesting too. One of the guys in Australia said where uh, before COVID he would sell a customer 6 bottles. Now the customer will buy one, but agreeing with what you say, he would buy one, but one that's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. I
So
mean, the cost of living crisis, you can't underestimate that.
yeah,
Fuel costs, and eating out in restaurants. We used to do it without thinking. Now it's so all about it. So
yeah,
so 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 the way we're drinking alcohol is changing. Is we're being forced to change how we drink alcohol. And but hand in hand with a greater knowledge. People, they know more about wine and whiskey, as an example. When we did Bruichladdich at the beginning, you weren't even allowed inside a distillery. They were off limits.
yeah.
We opened the doors and said, "No, come on in. We'll show you how it's made. Have a look. Come in. We'll put web cameras up. You can see how we make whiskey." Because it's very important that and so that Bruichladdich generation were the first to be really shown the insides of distilling and what it's about.
Yeah.
And now you've got a second generation following that they already know what the Bruichladdich guys do. Now they've all got phones and everything. They want to find out more.
Yeah.
So there's a curiosity, a natural human curiosity to know more. And so I think brands that have something to say and something to share are going to be the ones that benefit from that curiosity, that natural curiosity.
Well, I've got a question for you. This came up real early on, and I've been sort of holding off a little bit. But the question is, can you see yourself returning to either Scotch or Irish whiskey?
Well, I have to say I really enjoyed my experience in Ireland. There was an enthusiasm. There wasn't the cynicism of Scotland. There was a freshness, and yes, there was a bit of Wild West thrown in as well. But that was, it was very exciting, and we were doing something special. I've had my fingers burnt. It's been painful. I found it very hard to let go, trying to salvage something from Waterford, because for the simple reason that I couldn't have done anything better. It is the ultimate setup, and it's very, very sad to see it get split up.
Yeah.
The distillery side of it, well, okay, you can replicate that. That's not the end of the world. The logistics, the barley and the malting and how that and the farmers and their contributions to it, that's more difficult.
Yeah.
So well, I hope, touch wood, to be able to come back with some of this stock that is there. That's what I'm negotiating at the moment to acquire.
Well, the thing is, if you
can't let go, that's the problem, because if you thought that, oh well, it's all just whatever, but no, I know how good it is, so I really want to share that. I want to show people what it is we were doing, and to be able to show them.
You've got the product there, so it would be a shame to not be able to take that through to get it out.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a pride thing. But there's also, there was no stone unturned. There's nothing better that I could have done. So this is an ultimate whiskey project. Now, I won't be able to continue the brand because that went with the distillery. I tried to get it, but I was unable to do so. But I can get some of the stocks, and the stocks that I'm wanting are the organic and the biodynamic, the heritage, and the peated. So a new brand will emerge from this.
Yeah.
And I hope I won't be too long away before I can tell you more about that.
Yeah, when you were distilling from the individual farms, how much difference was there from farm to farm?
All right, I'll show you. It's very simple. I can show you pictorially. Well, I would if I could find my. Right. Okay. Here we go. All right. Point one. Okay. That is the profile. You didn't have to look at the words. It's too small. But
hey, Mark, can you just go into your camera and just flip it, because it's back to front.
What is?
Yeah, your camera is flipped, so you can't read it.
Well, you don't need to. It's the shape. You just need to see the shape. All right.
Okay.
You just need to see the shape. You'll see yellow, and then you'll see blue at the edges and green.
Yep.
So that's 3 harvests, 1 farm, and so as you'd expect, harvest to harvest to harvest, there are obviously subtle differences.
Yeah.
So in 216, you can see that it's more peppery. The blue here,
yeah.
There's green there. In 215, it's more, what's that? Clove-like, but more or less, those 3 harvests occupy the same shape, don't they? It's more or less the same shape.
It's pretty much the same.
Yeah, but with obvious climatic subtle differences. But if I show you another one, that's another farm, okay?
Yep.
Different shape. Here you've got even more. Oh, where's it gone? There you go.
No, stay there. There you go.
So there you've got, the three climatic, the same 3 years have had even more dramatic difference. But the shape is very different. If I go back to that first one, so that looks almost like Africa, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That one, okay.
Yeah.
And then if I put that plus
that's
the first one plus another one together, what you see is it's occupying the whole, the three of them together are occupying a much bigger area.
Yeah.
That's the last one. The blue one is the one before that, and then the green one I haven't got here to show you, but three different profiles, three different farms, one on top of the other, you get a more complete flavor wheel.
Yeah.
Well, we had distilled 120 different farms. So I think the way to explain it is, I remember seeing a documentary about Abbey Road Studios and George Martin. Do you remember the manager of the producer of the Beatles?
Yeah.
And he took Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys into the studio at Abbey Road. And he took one of his famous songs, God Only Knows.
Yeah. And
they played it, and they're sitting at the mixing table, the mixing desk. Now, you'll remember this, Buddy Holly in that era, it was a one track. They all got into a room and they had one microphone and recorded everything.
Yeah.
And then you got, 4 track, where the guitar, the drum, each had their own microphone recording it. And then you had 8 track, 32 track, 64 track, 128 track. And that's what he's standing in front of, a table, 128 tracks, the cymbals, the tambourines, the drums, the solos, the backing vocals, every single one has its own track. And with the song, God Only Knows, they played the song. And then George Martin, one by one, he reduced the tracks. He took off the vocals. He took off the drums. He took off the lead guitar until there was only Brian Wilson's voice and carrying the melody. And then he reassembled it. He put on the drums just a little bit. He put a little bit more tambourine, a little bit more this, a little more. And he remixed it.
Yeah.
And Brian Wilson went, well, Jesus, that's better than mine. That's fantastic. The point I'm trying to say is you need to think of whiskey flavor like that mixing table, except there's 2,000 tracks. 2,000 tracks. So every barley has those 2,000 tracks. It's just a question of how far the lever is on each one. And those levers, the volume, is influenced by climatic and soil terroir differences. Yeah. We know 60% of the flavor of a whiskey is influenced by terroir, the flavors of the barley, 60% of them. So each of those flavors is created by a gene on the barley genome. And that barley gene has a switch which turns on the flavor and it turns it off. And that switch is activated by humidity, by light, luminescence, whatever, the terroir factors, and that switches it on and off. So that determines the volume of each of those tracks, flavor tracks, on your mixing table. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what that image is showing you. The same sort of thing. This is what happens if you put 3 mixing tables together.
Yeah.
You're getting this wonderful multi-layered harmonic sound of flavor. That's the principle.
Now,
Simple, really.
now what, once you've got that flavor before it goes into the cask, how do you ensure that the cask doesn't wipe it out?
Oh, yes. Well, very, very good. We talked earlier, you said, does the cask actually give you it? There are flavors extracted from new oak. What do you remember? The lignins, the vanillins. Vanillin, it's the same compound as vanilla, vanilla pod, the same compound. So lignins, vanillins, and tannins of the wood are leached out by alcohol. Alcohol's very good at doing that. It's how you make perfume. You take a bunch of rosemary and a bunch of alcohol, you put the two together, and you end up with rosemary flavored alcohol and a bunch of twigs. That's what alcohol does. It's a medium. It extracts flavor. And so the higher the alcohol, the more it extracts. So you put 70% alcohol into fresh oak, virgin oak, and it will extract very quickly the lignin, vanillin, and tannin. So it will give it a sweetness, a darkness, pretty quick.
Yeah.
But that's on top of the 2,000 flavor compounds that are there in the barley.
But
right?
but if you put that into fresh oak, isn't there a chance you're going to overpower the?
If you did too much, yes, I agree. If it was only, you'd end up with bloody bourbon. So no, you need and this is what used to happen with whiskey. We know pre-73, in the old days, there was better brewing, there were better barley, there was better barrels, the BBB, better barley brewing and barrels. The barrels, the UK is an island. Ireland is an island. So everything that came there, every drink, whether it was Burgundy, Bordeaux, Banyuls, whatever, it came in a barrel. And those barrels, this is why all the wine merchants were based in ports. They'd take the barrels off the boat, bottle it up, and the barrels didn't go back on the boat away. They went to Scotland and to the distillers.
Yeah.
In fact, my first job in the wine trade in the summer of 1980 was addressing empty wine barrels that we'd just bottled to distilleries in Scotland. And that's what used to happen. So whiskey was maturing up to the 70s. It was maturing in a wide portfolio of wood types. French oak, American oak, you name it, everything. Yeah. They didn't care. It was whatever barrels turned out, and they were free because they were being got rid of. But that all changed in the 70s when the French had the audacity to say, "Oh, hold on a second, we're going to bottle the wine ourselves. So no barrels for you," which, of course, it started at the top and it worked its way down as a quality control method.
Yeah.
And it just created a shortage of barrels. So instead of having them coming out of your ears, now it was like, well, hold on a second. Now what do we do? Reuse them. And that's when the recycling started. Because remember, it wasn't going into a bottle as single malt. It was going as a blend.
Yeah.
Single malt hadn't happened, so it didn't matter, did it? It's just going into a blend, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So reuse the barrels, not once, not twice, but 10 times. Doesn't matter. But what if it won't add any flavor? It doesn't matter. It's going into a blend. And that's sort of what's come back to bite the industry in the behind now.
Yeah.
Is that single malt has taken off. those whiskies destined for blending have been redirected to single malts, but the barrel and the production levels were not really intended for that sort of scrutiny.
So
Hence now you have finishing.
So the barrels that you were using at Waterford.
Well, you're looking at them there. There they are.
Yeah, but
look at the diversity. The top left, you've got a French wine hogshead.
Yeah,
you've got American American first fill barrels in the top 2-3 rows. You've got the bottom left, you've got some virgin barrels. You've got some virgin American bourbon, the second row up on the left-hand side, and the fourth row on the left-hand side. French wine hogsheads at the top right-hand corner. So what we replicated in Waterford was what used to happen before 1973. So in other words, the diversity of American and French oak, sweet wines and dry wines, the different permutations to get a much more balanced and realistic maturation for every single farm. So every single farm benefited from the same barrel profile. As I said, wood is important, but it's for maturation. It's the micro-oxygenation. Now, this is to carry on the genetic thing about the flavor. What happens to those flavors when you put them in a barrel? Right. Now, I like this bit because what we understand now is that the flavor compounds that go in are exactly the same as the flavor compounds that come out at the end. And you could say, well, hold a second, but I've tasted new spirit and it's sure as hell isn't the same as mature spirit. So what's going on? Well, yes, there are the extractive flavors from those compounds we described earlier on top. But fundamentally, the micro-oxygenation through the wood is creating a weird effect. What it's doing is it seems to be making flavor compound A gang up on flavor compound B and give the appearance of flavor compound C. So there seems to be this subversion or augmentation of the flavor compounds and how they appear. So this is the latest thinking, the latest understanding of what happens to flavor during maturation. It's not fully understood yet, and I think that's probably a good thing. But it's to do with that micro-oxygenation, which means you need to have fresh wood.
Yeah.
I've seen, and others in the industry, I've seen 30-year-old, very, very famous distilleries, 30-year-old whiskies that are like, they're like that. They're like water.
Yeah.
The barrels, yes, famous, this sherry barrel, but I mean, a barrel that's been used 7 or 8 times is useless. It's not doing anything.
So you're when you're using these fresh barrels, you must have to be pretty careful that you don't overpower. If you're going for the flavor, for the terroir, you've got to be really careful.
Sure. What you're getting at is virgin oak. Fresh and virgin are 2 different things. Virgin oak that's never been used, it's had nothing in it whatsoever. Yes, those you have to use very carefully.
Yeah.
But they have a place in the whole, in the cuvée, for color, and for the sweetness or the vanilla flavors that you get from American oak, for example.
So you are using ex-bourbon, ex-sherry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But sherry, be careful. Sherry is one of the biggest con tricks of the whiskey industry. It's basically a euphemism for using lots of E150 to color whiskey, and saying, well, but it's from the sherry wood. We put it on the label. So it's a very naughty a euphemism that is bandished around, sherry wood on labels. But the reality is that the weasel word is seasoned, sherry seasoned, which basically means it's an American or Spanish oak barrel that's had a couple of bottles of sherry rolling around in it, and the guy's bought it at twice the price of a normal barrel so that he can put the word sherry on the label. It's so tired. It's such an old thing. Back in the day when sherry was being shipped all the time, and they were shipping barrels of sherry, and the sherry was sitting in them for years and years and years. You're right. Sweet, dark sherry covered a multitude of sins. But really, if it's well distilled whiskey, you don't want to slather it up with makeup. You want to let the whiskey do the talking.
Yeah.
So no, I'm a real curmudgeon when it comes to sherry. I think it's almost scandalous. And it keeps the sherry industry going, because they can't believe these Scots are being so so pedantic about having these ridiculous barrels.
Yeah.
So really, these sherry barrels are being used as finishes, but they can't finish because there isn't any color there. Really, they're better used for long-term maturation, and just come clean with the fact that you're adding bucket loads of E150 to sweeten and darken the spirit, and be done with it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've got some questions that were sent in, and these are the nerdy questions for you. Okay. Oh yeah. Well, we talked about those diagrams showed the different chemical markers for differentiating the farms. So we've seen that.
A fingerprint, a footprint. Yeah.
Yeah. To what extent does fermentation amplify or diminish terroir?
Fermentation is the most important thing, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. The distilling bit, the shiny bit, that's a red herring. The actual physical distilling bit is a question. It's very, so there's two ideas. It's how greedy are you going to be? In other words, how big a
how big a cut
you're going to take, and therefore how cheap the spirit is going to be, and how big a pat on the head you're going to get from the boss. And the other one is how fast you're going to be. So fast and furious is going to produce thinner spirit, whereas low and slow is going to produce more rich, unctuous spirit. So those are the two things: how impatient and how greedy. That's the distilling bit. The real flavor driver is the barley, and therefore how you get those flavors from the barley via malting, via milling, and fermentation into the alcohol. And industrial distilling has perfected this down to a one-day fermentation, because time is money. It's called a high density fermentation. You use double the amount of yeast. You get a very volatile fermentation, and bish bash bosh, it's all over within 24 hours. You then have the more traditional fermentation, which is a 2.5 day one, where half the volume of yeast, it lasts for, climate dependent, 2.5 days. And then you can have what the French wine people do. And this is at the thrust, some of you probably realize by now that a lot of the inspirations I've put in play come from what I learned in the wine world during that sort of renaissance during the 80s and 90s. And one of those was temperature controlled fermentation. If you can control the temperature by preventing the fermentation from taking off too quickly, keeping it, around 28, 29 Celsius. So in other words, you're not freezing it; you're just stopping it getting overexcited,
slowing it down.
You can then eke out the fermentation for a number of days. It's a bit like sort of, surfing a wave. You can keep it going, but it needs attention. You've got to pay attention to because if it collapses and stops, then you're fucked.
Yeah.
And if it takes off, and then you've lost it again. So it's got to be ridden, this wave, and you can eke it out to 8 days. So what's the point of doing that? Well, one, you need a lot of space. At Waterford, we had it. But secondly, it allows a secondary fermentation to occur, which is called a malolactic fermentation. And this converts harsh malic acid into softer lactic acid, which gives you a sort of creamier profile. So the interest for me in using temperature control, hence this state-of-the-art brewery, was it allowed you to have, I think, the only secondary malolactic fermentation in the whiskey world, because it gives you that creaminess, that middle palate creaminess. So a point we should, what is the profile of a whiskey? It should have a bouquet. It should have body and richness, and it should have a length to the profile. And those sort of elements are controlled by, well, the milling and how you mash. Then the fermentation, the middle bit, and then the length of flavor, from the low and slow distillation, the richness of the mouthfeel.
Yeah.
And so I think, once you grasp those principles, it becomes easier to understand what those different bits are contributing.
And that's obviously a little bit hard for one of the big distillers to do, because they're sort of
time. It's time and time. The whole idea of clap, cheapest liter of alcohol possible, is, time is money. So the faster you can do all these things, the cheaper it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because it's only going into a blend, or at least it was. Whereas if you slow it all down, you need the space, and you need the desire to do it. But it gives you that chance to really make something different, and that's sort of why I hope you can see why I'm finding it very difficult to let go of what we put in play at Waterford.
Okay, now we move on from fermentation to distillation. This is another question for you. How do you distill in a way that preserves origin character rather than smoothing it out?
How do you say that again? How do you
distill in a way that preserves the origin character, I guess the original character, rather than smoothing it out?
Well, I mean, as I sort of said, the distilling, everybody's told in the whiskey world it's master distiller and it's alchemy, and it's not. It's very, very simple. Fermentation creates the alcohol. 8-9% alcohol. The distillation is just concentrating the alcohol at the expense of the water. It's schoolboy chemistry. It's not complicated, but it's given this huge sort of majestic, magical, alchemaic sort of thing. Totally disproportionately. Of course, it looks much more impressive. Fermentation, there's nothing to see. And it's a microbiology, and it's all a bit sort of complicated. Whereas stills, it's easy. You see it coming out. So I think there's a disproportionate interest in the distilling bit at the expense of the actual flavor creation.
Yeah.
So the principles are, as I described earlier, it's how greedy and how impatient. Still shapes. You showed a still there. I mean, for the last 80 years, we've all known what this optimal still shape is. Before, from 1800 through to 1880, there was lots of experimentation. Everybody had their own idea of what the stills should look like, and they experimented a bit like how Formula One used to be. In the days of Graham Chapman and Ken Tyrrell and Jack Brabham and stuff, every meet there would be a new idea, a new aerofoil or whatever, and that's sort of how stills were during the 19th century, and so by the time it got to the late 19th century, everybody knew that you needed to have tall, narrow necks if you wanted purity of spirit and elegance. Whereas the original stills that were sort of shoehorned into a sort of Hebridean buyer were by default short and stubby, and those produced much more medicinal, literally less refined spirits, because the alcohol vapor didn't have much of a job, getting from the body of the still into the lin arm and into the condenser. So pretty much by 1880 or whatever, everybody knew what the optimum shape was, and it hasn't really changed very much from that date.
Yeah, because looking at the Waterford stills there, they're pretty short and squat, really.
Well, that's misleading. Very misleading. Look at the size of the barrel there. Okay, that's a bourbon barrel. So very misleading. And what you're not seeing is what's under the floor. So you're seeing 2/3 up the still. So those were stills. In fact, those were new ones that we'd installed, but they were based on the blueprints of the ones that were there before, which I stole. I stole them from Dumbarton, the Dumbarton distillery there, Inverleven. And then I took them to Bruichladdich and I stole them from there as well. So they're double stolen. So they went from Glasgow to Islay to Waterford.
Oh, those exact stills.
Except those ones there, I don't know when that photograph was taken, but they were replaced relatively. So Tennessee Distilling have got 2 new stills. Very, very lucky for them.
Okay, I got another question for you. Have you seen cases where cask selection actually masks the terroir? Oh, we've sort of talked about that, really, haven't we? Where cask,
yes, the point is no, the cask selection can't, because what you were all sort of thinking about is that the cask is dominating the flavor compound. It can't. The flavor compounds in that barley grain are immutable. You cannot destroy them. You cannot lose them. They're fixed. So think of it this way: if you took a barrel and you filled it with neutral alcohol, or you filled it with vodka, what do you get at the end? Whiskey?
Yeah.
No, you don't. You just get a woody. It's not very nice at all. Neutral alcohol. You're not going to get whiskey. Whiskey's flavor comes from the barley. Right, that's the fundamental flavors that are there. The wood element, the extraction of the wood, that's on top. It's not the fundamental flavor that is derived from the barley.
Okay, here's a good.
I know it sounds a bit odd, but it's understanding the intrinsic flavor complexity isn't what happens in the barrel. It's what happens in the field. It's the barley that is giving you that.
Here's a good one for you. Is going back to the stills. Surely, if you have a tall still and a lot of boiling of the liquid, aren't you going to boil the? Oh, hang on, this is translated from a foreign language. If you've got a tall still, isn't the distillation basically what I think what they're saying is, if you've got a tall still, isn't the distillation necessarily going to separate all those flavors that you're trying to get in there, and would a shorter, smaller still hold on to the terroir better? The
terroir's going nowhere. The barley flavors are going nowhere. Okay, that you cannot lose them. So let's get that one clear. What's happening with the remember, you don't fill the still to the brim. The where that floor plate is, that's about the level of how that still will be filled.
Yeah.
So the vaporization of the alcohol is going up the middle of that neck, hitting the side of the copper, and then it's condensing back into liquid and trickling back down into the body of the still for that to be repeated.
Yeah.
And each time that's happening, it's a continuous process inside of vaporization and condensation called reflux. That eventually the alcohol vapors are light enough to actually get right up the middle without touching either side, and then into the linarm to be condensed. And so you are refining out the impurities that stay in the body of the still after you've taken your cut.
Well, I think that answered that question. Okay, what else have we got here?
That map, by the way, the map at the back there is those white dots. Those are different farms.
Yeah, I figured
that's the southeast of Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured that's what it was. There's a lot more dots on the wall there, ready to go too.
No, that's the other way around. Those are ones we had done.
Oh, right.
Because we didn't always follow the same farms every year. Sometimes farmers didn't want to follow us, and sometimes we didn't want to follow them, and sometimes we couldn't, and sometimes we found new ones that we really wanted to work with.
Here's one for you. At what point did you become convinced that terroir wasn't just a wine concept, but something whiskey should take seriously?
Well, whether it's whiskey should take seriously or I wanted to take seriously, and that's I take it back to that Christmas 2003 at Bruichladdich with the farmers, with the new spirit. and letting them try for themselves and hearing from them what they thought. That really, for me, was proof positive that, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, you were getting this validation. I want to reiterate here that just because it's known in wine doesn't mean it should be ignored anywhere else. I'm sure if we had an English language word that encapsulated it, there wouldn't be half the issue. But I think it's, some people, oh, it's wine, it's, a bit she and a bit sort of, I'm not comfortable with that. And others deliberately don't want to know because it asks too many questions, awkward questions. Yeah. So I think it's a double whammy that people don't want to talk about it. Now, when you drink a dram, is that necessary to know? Not really. It's what's in the glass. Is it pleasing you? Is it giving you the complexity and the effect that you want? So terroir is even for me, it's a little bit of a red herring. It's how we get the components. It's how we get the components that we can then bring together to create the mindfuckery. It's the mindfuckery I'm after. All right. So it's a means to an end, but you need to understand it if you want to know. As to why we do the single farms. It's capturing those individual flavors, profiles, which we can then stack together. Because in your glass, like a giant striptease, they're going to come off, layer by layer by layer. And that's the real thrill of single malt whiskey that makes it the greatest spirit in the world.
Yeah, I like this on your spirit safe, that you've got each farm that's being distilled listed on the spirit safe. Yeah.
Well, and the guy who's doing it, because he's making the decision about when that cut's made.
Yeah.
So it's only right that his name goes with it. Yeah. So the terroir is a means to an end. It's a process to the end. So we talked about terroir with the single farms, which was the stage 1 of Waterford. Yeah. Stage 2, which is where I was just getting to, was bringing those single farms together to show you what it actually does. And then stage 3 would have been, this summer, 10 years of age, to show you the ultimate variant, the ultimate bottling of what this is all about.
And there's a good chance you may still be able to do that.
Touch wood. Touch wood.
Touch oak.
Touch wood.
Well, listen, I think we've been going for 2 hours.
Have we?
Yeah. God, you can talk, Mark, I tell you.
Well, it's.
I remember when we used to come and film you at Bruichladdich, I was always worried that we were going to run out of tape.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but no. I mean, it's if you got something. I mean, some people in this industry will tell you lots of funny stories, and other people will tell you lots of blah blah blah. I'm just telling you what motivates me to do this, to have done it.
That's what we're interested in too.
And at the end of the day, it's about drinking whiskey.
Yeah,
drink less, but drink better.
But here's one final question for you. Where do you see the whiskey industry going, like in the next 5 or 10 years?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I think we are in a changing, an era of change. You remember I said earlier about how the industry would be bitten in the bottom by this clap principle.
Yeah.
It was fine when it was for blending whiskey, and it would be blended away, it would be colored, and it would be chill filtered, and it would be, whatever, lost in a, it was basically single malt being a whiskey essence in a blended whiskey. You had your relatively neutral column still spirit, or as the Irish would call it, silent spirit, and the color, the volume, the voice was being added by introducing various single malts in varying proportions. That was the whiskey model that was so successful. It allowed the Johnny Walker to walk around the world and all that. When single malt took off accidentally in the early 80s, those companies went, "Oh, look, make much more money selling single malt. We want a bit of this." So they just redirected. They turned the spigot. They turned it from blending whiskey into bottling it up as single malt. In fact, they did both. Many distilleries, and they still do, provide both. They provide the whiskey for blending and the same stuff for bottle, for single malt, but the same production values. So my critique of the industry is, you saw how it was going, but you didn't change your production criteria.
Yeah.
You could have done a better job. You could have done two, one for blending and a better one, slower distillation, better barley, better wood, better brewing, and use that for single malt. But they didn't do it. So when single malt took off, you've got the same tired, exhausted barrels being used. And of course they go, well, actually, you know what? We can just make it up at the end. We can put lipstick on the pig. We can finish it. We can take a fancy barrel. What barrel do you like? Tequila barrel, rum barrel, port barrel, whatever it is. And hey, presto, we've got 5 versions of from one supply line. We've got 5 variants. Fantastic. The marketing guys will love us. It's fantastic. But what happens when people start criticizing it and going, well, actually, I don't want this add-on. This is a bit like the difference between Apple computers and Microsoft. Microsoft takes MS-DOS and he's stuck on it, the Windows concept. It's 2 different systems together, which is why it gets viruses all the time. Whereas Apple was built from the ground up. That's what we're talking about here. Finish is that bolted on at the end, and it shows. To the vast drinking populace, they probably don't care, but there's increasingly a demographic that does, and they can see that it's a mismatch. And why are you finishing something after 20 years? Why do you need to finish? What was it, a waste of time, that 20 years? So my fear is there's 2 things. One is that they're going to wake up and go, well, hey, why bother with 20 years in between? We'll just go straight to the finish. Much cheaper. So that's my first one. The second one is that a lot of these mid-ranking malts with that production value that I've just described, they're going to say, well, why bother doing this anymore? We're being asked too many awkward questions. How do we answer, this? How do we say that, and I think they're going to go back to blended whiskey. So I think what you're going to hear is a lot more about the artistry of the blend And they're going to talk this up a lot, that single malts, but really, the artistry, the master blender, distiller thing, that's about blended whiskey. That's where the true art is. I think that's what you're going to see.
Yeah.
As some of them move away from the awkwardness of having painted themselves into a sort of nihilistic corner, from which, the questions are getting a little bit too scary, and they're going to move away back to what they know, which is blended whiskey.
Yeah.
So I think that there's going to be a movement back to that. You're going to have the top guys getting ever more on the pedestal, and at the other end, a whole new range of people coming through, like Peter, you spoke to last week, smaller distilleries. And they're not just Scottish, they're Irish, French. France has got more single malt whiskey distilleries than Scotland. They're all very small, but there's 1,000 in America. So you got these new distilleries coming through. And of course, the very nature of whiskey, it takes time, for this to happen. But I think the future is very interesting.
Yeah.
And the interest, the diversity, the individuality, the quality is down there, not up there.
Well, there's an interesting thing with, like in Australia, I think there's 180 small distilleries. Some of them are only producing about 3,000 litres a year. Most of them are around the 20,000 litre mark. But it's a little bit like the slow food movement in a way, that all these individual areas are producing their own whiskies now, which is going to decentralize the whole whiskey industry.
Well, but isn't it funny? Because that's exactly how it started.
Yeah.
That's how it all started. It wasn't just 20,000. This was one-man band. So you had your family, you had your cows, you fed your cows on barley, and any barley left over, you distilled on your own handmade still. That's how it was for from 800 through to 1800, for 1,000 years. And then it was obviously, hold on a second, this has got to be controlled. The idea of, trying to consolidate it all backfired, never worked properly until the 1823 Licensing Act, which basically said, look, if you can't beat them, join them. And the idea there was you had to do two things. One, you had to buy a license. That was £100. And £10. It was £10. And you had to have 200-gallon capacity for your still. In other words, you couldn't carry it on your back and walk off into the woods to distill. And secondly, you had a license, so we know where you are, and we can come and get our money. So it was designed to stop it being a clandestine, movable feast, but planted, where it could be monitored and it, of course, could be taxed. And that was the big changing thing. That was 1823. And basically, as a community of farmers, they would have got together and said, well, look, okay, we're not all going to do it. So, which one of us is going to buy the license and chuck out the cows and shoehorn in a proper still? And it would have been the guy that grew the barley best, the guy that had the best barley, and the others would have supplied barley to him. And that's how it would have started, as a farm distillery.
Yeah.
And then that farm distillery, some of them survived, some of them didn't. Octomore, for example, that only lasted for 30 or 40 years before they emigrated.
I just got a note for you from Australia. I'd just like to thank Mark for his Hookhead single malt. Cheers, mate.
That's good, isn't it?
I believe you were right, and damn the begrudges.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think this will all wash out eventually over time, and people will realize as this new group of people come through. And I think it's really exciting what's happening. Not all of it will succeed. Not all of it is kosher. There's some funny things going here, but generally speaking, it's a very good thing to happen. It takes a long time for it to occur. Distribution is always the problem, because that's controlled by the big guys to keep little people out. So I think the scale.
If they're coming up with all these micro distilleries, they do their own distribution. You don't need big distributors because
that's keeping it tight, keeping it small. But then that means you can't see it over in Australia, in London or Sydney, whatever. But I think this is where the innovation is occurring. The whiskey industry has been very, very lazy. It's sat back on its laurels. It's taken the money. It's suddenly finding that it's getting a bit difficult, so we'll drop that one and go back to what we do over here. It's happened before. It happened in brewing. It happened in sherry. It's happened in plenty of things. But with that separation out, I think if I was a private like you, a private whiskey fan, it's an exciting. The next 5-10 years is going to be quite exciting as these new guys come on the block. With people distilling with heart and passion. Sure, there's one or two wide guys and whatever, but generally speaking, that's where the innovation and interest and quality is coming from.
Yeah. Now I've got another question for you. Can you see terroir-based marketing in whiskey becoming mainstream?
No. No, I don't. And I'm not even sure if it should.
Even with the smaller guys?
Well, I'm not sure if it should become mainstream. You've got to understand what it's for. What's the purpose of it? Just so you can say, I mean, it's like that that statement of farm to fork. Well, great, but what does it mean? I want to know I'm getting something that is honest, pure, natural, and of the place. That's what it means to me. But these marketing, these rather bland marketing that are open to abuse, just like Terroir is. It's open to be, appropriated, misappropriated. So I think we need to be careful of how we use that term, because people will say, "Oh, I use it because it makes me sound really sophisticated, or it makes me sound really, sort of ooh." Well, so it's going to get corrupted. There's no doubt about it. So I don't think we should all be hanging our hats on it. It's more about, it's for you to know. And I think for producers to deploy in how they set up their logistics and their provisioning.
But do you see? I think I know what this guy's getting at is, the way wine is. You get a Chateau Neuf de Pape, or you get a Bordeaux, or a Burgundy, or a Chablis, or because. How were you going to market the Waterford? Because if you're taking a few farms and blending them together, surely marketing them by place would be a good marketing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's that's always an option. To do it, individually, diversity. Compare and contrast, of course. But the main thrust of the project is to bring those flavors together to create this ginormous striptease of flavor in your glass.
Yeah.
That's the aim. So terroir by terroir comes out in the wash, so to speak.
But what would you call that? Like when you bottled it, what would you call it?
Say again, I didn't hear that.
When you bottled it, what would you put on the bottle? What would it be called?
What I'm going to do.
Yeah, like say you took three farms and combined them together.
Well, it was when I had it. It was Waterford, and we gave it a Cuvée name. So this one is Cuvée coffee, or that one's
Oh,
Cuvée
okay.
or whatever. You give it a title.
Yeah,
But ultimately, it would have been, this is the Waterford.
yeah. Oh, gotcha.
That would have been where I wanted to get to by this time, or June 226.
So your marketing would be Waterford whiskey, and then you would buy different cuvées.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I mean, and that's what we started doing. That was stage two,
yeah,
and we started that in America and in Europe, but we didn't get as far as you. But ultimately, it's the Waterford, and it's this compote of terroir derived flavors, giving you this extraordinary multi-layered, multi-dimensional drinking experience, the
yeah,
likes of which you will never have anywhere else, because no one has put that into play. So what we're talking about, what I failed to give you is that result, and
yeah,
that's the frustration I've had, and I hope I'm able to rectify with what I'm trying to do at the moment with those Waterford stocks.
yeah,
So to reiterate, yes, the terroir is for me to know. That's what we've put in play. But for you, the consumer, it's what happens in your glass. That's what you want to find out.
yeah,
And if you want to find out more, we'll tell you more. but don't overload yourselves with the terroir story. That's a means to an end. And I think for the small distillers, producers, some of them will just go, oh, well, I get mine local barley, but you don't need to know. It's local barley, and others, lots of buzzwords, but they don't really do it, and they don't really understand. You can't join the dots. So I'd say to your viewers is do join the dots, look for the dots, and look to join them, because that's how you'll understand what the guy is trying to do and trying to show you, and that it's not just a series of buzzwords that sound really cool, but don't make much sense.
yeah.
Does that make? Do you
Yeah,
follow me?
no, I think that's good. Yeah. Well, listen. On that note, we might wrap it up.
All right. Okay. Good. I'll go and have my supper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic, mate. And
Well, nice to see you.
we did good. We went for 2 hours. Thank God you were online, because I had it that I wasn't starting till 3 o'clock US time, but it was 2.
Well, it's
So
normally me that gets it wrong.
yeah, I know. Okay, well that's
All right.
don't close your browser. Leave your browser open, because
All right.
it'll still be uploading to the web for about 5 minutes.
All right. Okay.
And I'll just turn you off, and then
Well, and if there's any other questions, anybody wants to send them to me, do. But by all means, you can send them to me at my email is markreynier@mac.com. I'm on WhatsApp. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
I'll put that in a post under the when we put this up live. Put the replay up.
Fingers crossed. We'll be back in the saddle.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
We're looking forward to it.
And there's one other little project I've been asked to work on it, which is a wee farm distillery on Islay, which would be quite amusing to do, to really very, very local barley. So watch this space.
Well, we'll have to do a live stream on that too. Okay, well, thanks, mate. So just keep your browser open so that it keeps uploading.
All right. So right. I'll do that. Right. Well,
yeah. Okay. Thanks, mate.
Bye bye.
Mark, thanks very much, mate, for a fascinating conversation and for spending so much time with us. I really appreciate that. What really stands out is just how much there is still to explore in whiskey, particularly when it comes to ideas like terroir, provenance, and how flavour is actually created. It's a conversation that challenges long-held assumptions and one that's clearly not going away anytime soon. So thanks to all of you for joining us live. If you'd like early access to the full unedited replay and a chance to submit questions ahead of upcoming conversations, you can join us in the Members Lounge. Next Friday, April 10th, or Saturday morning in Australia, I'll be joined by David Ligoff for Whisky and the Movies, where we're going to explore how whisky is used in film, what it says about character, story and mood, and how it's used for promotion through product placement. If you enjoyed this session, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Single Malt TV.